it's a really unique opportunity to like create a village center or a downtown where there's been an industrial operation for about 200 years. I think some of the documents from the Historical Society, there's been a tannery there for 100 years and some kind of milling for about 200. And so there's been generations that have lived in Hartland and not seen their riverfront. The Sebasticook River abuts and runs right past this whole property. And so we want to make sure that we're, giving the community access to that resource that's incredibly valuable, and then doing responsible redevelopment work that's aligned with the community need and is going to be contributing to the quality of life in Hartland.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot of Pouliot Real Estate, each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. Today on Housing Matters, I'm thrilled to have joining us Gabe Gauvin. Gabe is the programs manager at Maine Redevelopment, where he leads key initiatives, including municipal technical assistance, Brownfields redevelopment, land bank operations, and special projects. He brings a background in place-based economic development, rural planning, environmental remediation, and navigating complex public-private redevelopment projects. Gabe has lived and worked in nearly every region of Maine, giving him a strong ground-level understanding of the state's diverse communities and the unique challenges that they face. He's driven by the opportunity to create tangible change through thoughtful community investment and revitalization efforts. Prior to joining Maine Redevelopment, Gabe worked with the Central Maine Growth Council, where he helped advance regional revitalization initiatives. His work included implementing post-COVID economic recovery programs, supporting tech and innovation startups, advising Main Street businesses, advancing housing projects, and facilitating long-term sustainable growth across the region. Gabe, really thrilled to have you joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks. Well, what an intro. Happy to be here.
Well, You've got a busy life, man. You're getting a lot done.
Yeah,
it's a lot to say.
You ain't kidding.
So I want to start off here, a little bit of background and perspective, across Maine. You've worked across economic development, planning, revitalization efforts in different parts of the state, and now you're leading programs at Maine Redevelopment. Can you walk us through your background from your time at the Central Maine Growth Council to your current role now, and how working in these different regions has shaped the way you think about redevelopment and community investment?
Yeah, sure. Even before working at Central Maine Growth Council, I was at the Kennebec Valley Council of Governments, where I got exposed to a lot of the environmental planning sides and started to get into some economic development work, but really just have always worked in some sort of public service form, and really find that mission-driven work and the ability to get into like real projects that are really locally focused and have a fairly immediate and visible impact really, really powerful and is encouraging for me to keep going when I'm doing that kind of meaningful and visible work that I can put my hands around. So, I've been in this part of the state, in the greater Augusta, Waterville, Central Maine area for probably 6 or 7 years now, and started just trying to help implement local planning efforts to then yield better investment and partnership strategies that could unlock some stuck properties. In this part of the state, in the whole state, there's a lot of rich industrial heritage and mill and manufacturing, and then a lot of utility capacity that goes along with that. So you get these complex projects that are that could be something really great and reused into to meet our current needs, but are stuck because they've got environmental issues, or they've got really complex ownership structures, or they've just been sitting vacant and mothballed for so long that the energy and cost to get them out of that pit of despair is so great that nobody will touch them. And so over the last few years, I've kind of worked on all the different aspects of these types of projects, from planning and from trying to help close gaps at the end, and then trying to program buildings that were then post redevelopment. So now in this role at Maine Redevelopment, we get to do that every day. So it's covering the entire state. It's touching projects that are everywhere in that life cycle of redevelopment, and trying to help municipalities and other partners get really good at identifying what those common challenges are to moving something forward to that next phase, to reposition a property. And then how do we find, what's that common solution to fix that shared challenge? And how can we replicate that for folks all over the state?
That's really interesting, because I feel like there's a lot of times in which we hear this common sentence, which is, wouldn't it be great if, like somebody would take that old mill and do something with it? Wouldn't it be great if somebody would put something in there? And it's like, yeah, it would be friggin' great if somebody would do something with that. But we're in an environment with like more regulations, more rules, more expense to doing things. It requires a certain level of sophistication to know how to navigate these different things. You cannot just make it happen on a hope and a prayer, usually, And it sounds like that's what you're doing on a daily basis.
I mean, the ifs or the questions are part of what plague these properties. And so what we want to do is get good at answering those unanswered questions, getting to the one source of truth for a property, and knowing, why is it held back? What's the actual challenge? If there's a cost, what is that cost? And then how can us as an organization work to get rid of those barriers and create the conditions where the private sector or public sector can be successful?
So let's talk about the organization. Maine Redevelopment is a relatively new organization, right? Created by the legislature when I was there.
Yeah.
And launched in 2024 with a focus on helping communities to bring difficult properties back into use. How would you describe Maine Redevelopment to somebody who's listening right now for the first time, and what specific challenges across the state kind of led to its creation?
Sure. Yeah. So our mission is to help communities reposition their stuck properties and help them be revitalized to support what their current and future needs are. And so if you've got a stuck property or site, then we want to help you get it unstuck.
What might that look like to somebody? What is a stuck? If they were opening up the book dictionary and it says stuck property, what's next to it?
Probably one of those old mill and manufacturing buildings along the riverfront that's maybe been vacant for 20 or more years. We can talk more about it later on, but the first property that we brought into the land bank, the Hartland Tannery, is a really good example of that.
Yeah.
Something that was a key economic driver for the whole region, and then for a bunch of different reasons became vacant and underutilized, and has got a lot of barriers to getting it back reprogrammed. So,
what about so yes, there are going to be instances of these kind of more industrial-centric buildings that were built up around a time of making things. A tannery is an example. But what about like an old school, or like if a community takes 10 properties back on tax foreclosure and now they're just sitting empty? I mean, are there other kind of assets that people be only
absolutely.
big old mills?
Those industrial sites are the easiest to kind of to point to and identify, and are fairly common in our state. But yeah, old schools right now are a big thing that we're working to find a pathway to get them redeveloped. And if you talk to anybody in the state right now, there's probably they've got a school in their community or in their neighbor's community that is recently vacant or closing consolidation. So
yeah, because with a lot of these, there's change of use, and we've talked about building codes and zoning and all these kinds of things. But like in old school, as an example, when they built it, it was purpose built for educating people, even in a time in which like a window that was 2 feet tall and 4 feet wide was maybe fine for like school educating, but doesn't meet modern fire code for egress purposes, so that somebody who's living in there as an apartment can like get out in a fire, as an example. And so you guys, when you're working with these old buildings, are you also working to try to help the municipalities and other people understand, like, all right, your vision is what it would be if this, like, in order to do that, you're going to have to meet these requirements, these changes are going to need to be made, and so forth.
Yeah. Another reason why a lot of the places sit vacant or have a hard time getting repurposed is because of some of those the updates to code and the investment that goes along with bringing it up to being usable and occupiable. So that's absolutely, the cost, generally speaking, is a huge barrier. And so and when we go to work on a property, when we hear about a site, when we want to provide some assistance to a municipality or an interested developer, one of the things we want to make sure is always there as a part of it is a community vision. So without local support, champions for a project, and a shared community vision of what they need in there to help their community move forward or to help get this property forward, you're not going to have a successful project. So having that buy-in locally and working to develop that, if it doesn't exist, is something that we're really passionate about doing on every one of these properties. And we'll do some of that work, but we also are really excited about bringing in the local partners and subject matter experts at the regional level with the councils of governments and the planning commissions and all those other support agencies that do really good planning work.
And you're able to do this from a more patient perspective because you're structured as a nonprofit entity?
So I went on a tangent there, but let me step back. So Maine Redevelopment, we are established 2022 by state statute, stood up in 24, and have now through 2025 gotten fully staffed up. And this year, 26, is our year of like execution and implementation and getting into projects. By statute, our scope is properties that are vacant, abandoned, functionally obsolete, or contaminated. Some like blighted properties, generally speaking, or that are stuck for maybe legal issues. Our structure is we are a quasi-governmental organization, so we're not a nonprofit, we're not an LLC, we're not privately owned. We sit in the middle and allows us to be mission-driven and collaborate really closely with the community and the municipality while being agile and responsive like a private entity or an entrepreneurial like kind of state of mind, which is really fun kind of work to do and be in, and is also kind of a necessity with some of the properties that we get into and the partners we work with, being able to show up and be responsive and do things like give lightning stabilization grants. It is one of the ways that we engage and is only possible because of our structure and our governance.
Yeah, so if a private developer were to say want to take on the old school in town that's been mothballed for the last 11 years and everyone's like, wouldn't it be great if somebody turned that into housing? They're going to inherit a lot of risk with owning that building, holding it while they're getting through due diligence, pre-development work and so forth to plan what might happen. They may get turned down, they may not, right? There's just a lot of reasons why which the private developer might be like, even though I know what to do with that building, I'm still passing because the risk is too high to like hold and get through pre-development. Do you come in at that level ahead of time to try to de-risk the property and like really make it?
Yeah, I mean, so we're happy to come in to a project at any stage, and if we need to, depending on what the needs are locally. So if there's a need for somebody to come in and kind of lead the cadence and the organization of all the partners and be a convener and really drive the process forward and keep the momentum going, we can do that. If all that's needed is one or a couple of our statutory tools in our toolbox, and we can just come in and unlock one thing or fix something or bring a little bit of funding to the table to close a gap, but we don't want to get in the way of really good partners doing good work, then we're happy to do that also. And at any point in the life cycle of the project. For the school example you bring up, if there's a developer already attached or interested, then that's already like, that's one win. And what can we do to make sure that project pencils out and keep that developer interested in the project? In a lot of cases, we're getting involved even earlier where the community is trying to decide if they want to vote to acquire the school that's being closed from by the RSU or the school district or whoever. So at that point, we're really doing, assessing what the building, what's that one source of truth again for the building, not just meets and bounds, but that the infrastructure, the utilities, what the zoning is and what the cost to upgrade things might be for different reuse scenarios for housing or mixed use or commercial use or whatever. So, we're touching all different sizes and scopes of projects at all different points in their life cycle.
So are land bank authorities, is this like the only one in the U.S.? Are there other ones?
So land banks are not uncommon. We are one of only, I want to say 4 or 5 statewide land bank authorities that exist in the country.
Interesting.
we are Maine Redevelopment Land Bank Authority. So redevelopment and land banking. We like to brand ourselves as just Maine Redevelopment because land banking is a tool in our toolbox. It's not the only thing that we do.
Right.
Municipal technical assistance, the environmental support with Brownfields funding, special projects, which is things that maybe we're asked to help out on by the legislature, or different ways that we creatively enter the capital stack of a project. The how we deploy our statutory tools, we package and sell them that way. Not sell, but that's how we kind of deliver our services.
Provide them, make them available to people. Yeah, that's interesting. So basically, like, you're a Swiss Army knife for redevelopment.
Yeah, we want to be the subject matter experts across the whole redevelopment life cycle and be able to support folks wherever they might be stuck on a site that has previously been developed and is now ready for its next chapter.
Well, that's a great segue into what I want to talk about next, which is the Hartland Tannery project. You're in the news for acquiring this Hartland Tannery. Can you walk us through that project and what the site is? Like, why is it significant, and what the long-term vision is for redevelopment? And before you answer, I'm going to just tell the audience that, like, for me personally, I've been a skeptic of this. And I'm somebody that's like, I consider myself to be somewhat visionary, willing to take risk, all this stuff. And I'm like, man, Heartland, like, are they ever going to get the critical mass enough beyond this being something that's just like cute in that town?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot more to it. So educate me.
Yeah, the Hartland Tannery. No, it's something that's been a big focus of ours since I joined last summer. It is the first property that we've acquired into our land bank. We currently own it as of this past January.
Can you speak a little bit mechanically on how it works? Not too in the weeds, but like, what does that mean? We own it in the land bank.
Sure. So the Hartland past Irving Tannery site was put on our radar by the community, as well as some of our board members on our board of commissioners, in the first year of kind of relevancy and listening sessions that were done by our executive director before we were even fully staffed up. There was about 6 months or so of really dedicated due diligence where we spent we invested in figuring out what all of the different complexities are of this particular site, what the legal challenges were with the title that needed to be untangled. The site had been through bankruptcy previously and was owned by a trust that was just kind of stood up to hold the property after bankruptcy, and was not tenanted and was just kind of deteriorating in place. Known environmental issues, of course, with the past tannery site. So we did engineering assessments, structural analyses, environmental site analysis, and did a whole new survey of the entire property, which is all about 10 parcels at approximately 30 total acres, a little under 30 acres. It's a pretty big meandering site, and there's a few additional properties that are detached from the core tannery property. And one way that we were able to get traction with the previous owners was by saying we're willing and interested in taking all of these properties, and so we worked with them to get all the paperwork together, did the title commitment work, and then everything based off of a purchase and sale option agreement, and then acquired the properties at the end of January. And the reason for acquiring when we did, rather than kind of taking a slower approach, is because one of the bigger challenges at the site is the perceived and real environmental impacts and hazards that are there. There's about $4 or $5 million worth of contaminated material and structures that need to be abated and then demolished on the site, that are not structurally sound or wouldn't be suitable for any sort of adaptive reuse because of their deteriorated state. And so we applied for federal funding through the EPA Brownfields program this past January, and we needed to own the site before we could submit that application. Mm-hmm. So we closed on it. 2 weeks later, roughly, we submitted that application, and then now we find out in June if we were successful in getting that funding to do the initial phase of abatement work on the site.
And for those listening, like the alternative would be a private developer would have to go through all of these machinations just to get to the point where they have kind of something as what would be maybe a clean slate to even start beginning to be redeveloped, whereas you guys are carrying a lot of that water to get it more ready.
Our goal here in Hartland is to get a clean title, get a clean property, get a really strong community vision of what the reuse needs are for this big site that isn't going to be one thing, most likely. It's going to be a mix of things because it's in the core of the community. It's riverfront property. And so over the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to be conducting community planning workshops with the residents and business owners in Hartland, focused on housing, business and economic development, and outdoor recreation and tourism, and showing them, some potential site renderings, giving the community something to react to, and just get their feedback on what the needs are and what could work on this big property. It's a really unique opportunity to create a village center or a downtown where there's been an industrial operation for about 200 years. I think some of the documents from the Historical Society, there's been a tannery there for 100 years and some kind of milling for about 200. And so there's been generations that have lived in Hartland and not seen their riverfront. The Sebasticook River abuts and runs right past this whole property. And so we want to make sure that we're, giving the community access to that resource that's incredibly valuable, and then doing responsible redevelopment work that's aligned with the community need and is going to be contributing to the quality of life in Hartland, and not, it'd be pretty, not easy, of course, but the simpler path would be to be like, okay, rectangle here, rectangle here, rectangle here, X amount of units in each one sitting right on the utility, but that's not necessarily contributing to the fabric of the community, and we want to make sure everything that we do on this kind of a site is
Maine seems to
well
have
integrated.
100%, and Maine seems to have a lot of these communities that, but for the fact that there was a river and the industry of a mill, whether it's a paper mill, a tannery, whatever, they never would have even happened at all.
Sure.
And so this is why I was starting with the Hartland thing, right? Because I spent 12 years in state government, and I recognize the pride people have in these different communities. And what's hard, I think, sometimes in Maine is that we have a hard time drawing in capital because people are looking at it from a demographic perspective, and they're just like, well, in 2026, there would not be another Hartland created. It would just be woods. You know what I mean? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. So what we need to do, and this is the work that you're doing really, is figure out ways to repurpose structures when there isn't a demand for the industry that caused them to be there for the first place to begin with anyway. I'm not suggesting nobody ever would have lived in Hartland. My guess is you wouldn't have had a giant industrial site built out without the ability to pull from power from the river and make jobs in that area. I don't know, maybe there was a lot of cows in Hartland and that's why they went there, but I'm assuming that's not why. So it's now we're left with, and they can be great things if this type of work happens, a lot of buildings that were built for a time which, isn't likely to come back because the kind of advanced manufacturing that's necessary in order to compete with China after NAFTA is only possible with certain segments and different areas that are maybe not just in the middle of rural Maine, Not to suggest you couldn't have a whole bunch of robots in a plant in Hartland, doing things the way they do in China with dark factories to be able to sell us stuff for 1 cent. But, this is what we're up against, and I think it's critical, and you're doing this work, and I'm happy to talk about, I would like to talk more about what the community wants to see there, and is it going to generate revenue sufficient to keep the lights on and keep paying the bills,
Yeah. So a couple of different answers.
And that was a
here.
long meandering thing.
It's good.
This is not just Hartland; it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. And so the first thing is, we've got a lot of these types of sites, right? There was all these infrastructure pieces built out to serve this one site that was, humming for years, but now is vacant. And so, in Hartland specifically, there's there's a special waste landfill, maybe a mile away. There's a wastewater treatment facility that's interconnected to the site. There's a ton of energy and other utility infrastructure right there that's just going underutilized because there's not enough draw, or there's more capacity than's being used right now. We actually, during that due diligence period this fall and over the summer, worked with Maine DECD and what was the Governor's Energy Office and is now Department of Energy Resources, I want to say.
Okay.
DOER. They had a program called MECERP, which I'm not going to remember that acronym either, MECERP. But generally, they looked at these sites across the state that sit on that kind of utility infrastructure. And were energy generator facilities that are now not used as such, and how can it be repurposed? And they brought in consultants to do site inventorying work and assessment of the region, and created a market analysis that then has kind of given us a basic framework to build off of, that we can work through with the community and say, okay, this is what outsiders have looked at, assessed, and said this is the infrastructure that exists, and this is what can be supported with it. Now, what do you need that we can map onto this and move forward with a good shared vision? And that program also included communities like Yarmouth and Wiscasset and Millinocket, who all have similar types of places. So to that point, this is a common issue, and we're trying to find a way to use this infrastructure because it's there, even though right today we might not go and plug all that infrastructure in that area. It's not aligning with form-based code principles or smart growth principles per se, but it's already there now. So let's make sure we're making the most of it.
Well, is it then going to be economically viable? Like, it's one thing for everybody to come around and I should probably say, like, I'm in favor of what's happening with the land bank.
Yeah.
I mean, I supported it in the legislature. But, like, I think a lot of times people come forward with ideas or design charrettes, and, like, these are all great things. But at the end of the day, like, do the economics bear out what making it happen,
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the tannery back in the day, whenever they were humming, they were making enough money to keep the thing going and provide the jobs, right? So is the reuse potential in the new way in which we do things, service-based economy, tourism-focused, maybe still economically viable with these types of facilities?
Yeah. I think one of the goals we have is through our engagement of getting rid of all the barriers that you would normally have to overcome to get a site like this repurposed, making sure that all of the local policy and zoning things are all stood up, so that doing everything we possibly can so that a developer can come in and be like, okay, everything's teed up, and we've heard from the community that they want 55 and older housing on this section. Maybe we put out an RFP that a developer can respond to, or we just do that kind of signaling and through policy that this is the kind of development that's wanted here. And our goal is not to be a developer. Our goal is to create those conditions where development can happen, and that will include underwriting the cost of property. So in Hartland, we're investing in this property. We're using our fund to clear these barriers to development. And in some cases, one of the ways that we're marketing or attracting or helping a project pencil out or attracting developers is by giving that property away for free, as long as that development is aligned with what the community needs are.
Yeah.
And so in taking away those early softer costs and some harder costs of the land acquisition element, we're hoping that we can make more projects pencil out in these challenging sites
and further de-risk them, and increase the likelihood that private developers come along and do something. And that's just something that I've been noodling around in my head a lot. It's like, wonder if, this will never happen. So sometimes it's a waste of time to think about these things. But imagine if NAFTA had happened in 1900 and we decided to ship all of our manufacturing overseas 100 years ago. How many of these communities would have even been here to begin with anyway? And I'm not suggesting that means they should go away, but it's just now we maybe have things in a geographic area that we have to try really hard, particularly in Maine, to figure out how to still continue to make that viable beyond I want it to happen because my dad worked there, my granddad worked there, and that doesn't matter to the banks anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of these communities are ones that are now, maybe more under-resourced. Maybe they're rural areas that one economic engine has gone away, and so the local government itself has shrunk, and maybe it's just a volunteer select board that meets once a month and is really just kind of keeping the tax book going and the municipal budget going annually, but isn't doing a ton more than that because they don't have the capacity to do it. And so we need to make sure that we're providing enough support that those projects in those areas can still move forward, because those are going to have an outsized impact versus doing a project in somewhere like Freeport or in the Portland area that has a lot more human capital and capacity to invest time in this type of work.
So in some respects, you're like the economic development team for rural Maine.
For the whole state. We'll work everywhere, but those under-resourced communities will maybe need a little more push or a little more assistance, and that's where we can kind of bring in that extra capacity. And they also have a lot more of these sites that are vacant still, that are post-industrial use.
The tannery is one example, but you just mentioned, you're in a range of sites across the state and the projects that you're working on. What are the ones that you're seeing like most often right now? And are there other like opportunities that they're out there that you would like to highlight, particularly to an audience that's listening that may actually be interested in doing some of these projects?
Yeah, sure. So school reuse, which we've already hit on, but that has been big on our radar in the last few months. One of the things that we heard from communities in the last year or two was that the challenge of dealing with these repurposing these schools, and especially the cost to manage them and keep them stabilized is in some of these smaller communities, equal to a big chunk of their annual municipal budget. And so, how can we help to manage those properties, or create the toolkit for how to do school reuse in a really efficient and successful way.
That's really cool what you just said there, a toolkit, because I think that there are, I don't know, we haven't polled the audience, maybe we should, like people that would step up to the plate to do this if they knew what the hell to do.
Yeah, survey says. No, so we want to provide as many of those sort of toolkits or guidebooks as we possibly can. And one of the ones that we focused in on for our first is a pilot project on school reuse. And so, we heard that this is a big challenge. We partnered with the Mid-Coast Council of Governments, who are working with schools in Brooks and Liberty that have closed in the last couple of years, with those local committees that are doing really good work. And through this process, we want to learn all the different challenges and sequencing and different programs that can help to unlock these properties. And we'll compile that into a toolkit, and then have this replicable model that we can share around the state with different communities and say, okay, like you've heard from the RSU or you heard from DOE that they're considering closing your school, and then offering it to the municipality to be for them to own it. Here's the questions you need to ask. Here's what the process looks like. Because in a lot of these communities, they've never been through something like that before, and it's a big time and cost commitment. And in a lot of cases, the schools in particular sit on infrastructure. They're important culturally and emotionally to the community. A lot of the properties we work on are really emotionally charged sites.
Yeah.
And they, the adaptation cost is significant, but generally they would convey really well as something like housing. We actually did propose a piece of legislation this past session that would create a fund to close gaps in schools that are that select a reuse pathway of affordable housing. Because sometimes even with all of the existing public finance tools and incentives, and maybe in some cases even with getting the property for free, infrastructure upgrades or life safety upgrades, like you mentioned, can still kill the project. And so what we proposed was pairing the technical assistance we can provide through that toolkit approach with some funding if you choose to create affordable housing, and and we got really great support from partners and organizations all across the state. Went through the Housing and Economic Development Committee, passed through Senate and House, and then looks like it looks like it will not be taken up by appropriations, because I don't think they're going to be meeting again.
No.
And so
the governor thought it was better to send everybody $300 checks than to invest in development. So I guess that's what happens when they're running for Senate. So
we're a little bit disappointed, and that's the outcome, but really heartened at the reaction we got from folks around the state.
Yeah.
And we'll do this again next year, next cycle, if there's still an appetite for this kind of a fund to support reuse of schools.
Yeah, it's tough because, I feel like if more people knew about this kind of work, and then we went to poll the audience, and this isn't a political show, but I can't get it out of my system, so I'm just going to say it. And we're like, hey, would you rather give your money to make sure that people in your community have housing that they could afford, or would you rather have as in this example, a $300 check? I think the majority of Maine people, I believe, in their good nature, would say we would rather support like the redevelopment to make access to housing possible. I really do. But it's not, these decisions are not made in a vacuum like that. It's not an either or thing. I'm not naive enough to suggest that it is. But what happens a lot of times is people are not, and this part of the work we're doing with this podcast, try to educate people on the fact that like the state has limited resources, and we all agree that we need more housing as an example, or more jobs that pay better for people, or more access to more opportunities in local economies. Like, maybe there could be like a medical facility in this old tannery, that people could go to see a primary care doctor instead of having to drive an hour to go see one or whatever. But unfortunately, the education system that we have there's no mechanism by which we're educating people about this stuff, and what the challenges are with development and everything. And then what happens is folks are like, why isn't this happening? And it's like, well, because we need to make the investments with the limited resources we have in actually like creating economic development, not just like burning money. So it's really frustrating because you see all this great work being done, and we have the foundational aspects to do it and everything. And then to hear you had bipartisan support for your bill. It went through a housing committee. That's Democrats, Republicans, and independents saying that this is a good idea. It gets through the House and the Senate. I'm not sure the breakdown of how everybody voted. Sure. I'm guessing probably some of the Republicans were sticks in the mud. At least that was my experience as a Republican being there. They didn't always support some of these great ideas, but it was like, very broadly supported. And then it gets to the Appropriations Committee. For those listening, they exist in every state and they exist at the federal level. And then the money's not there, not because we never had the money, but because it got spent on other priorities. And it's like, how long are we going to keep doing this before we recognize there are great hardworking people like you who are showing up every day that are like, hey, we need to be investing in the actual mechanical changes that are necessary to create the playing field for this to happen. Because unlike 100 years ago when the tannery was added onto, there's a lot more regulations and things that government has put in to protect people. Sure, yeah. And they're expensive to do. Yeah, you can't just like take a field that's got toxic waste and cover over it with pavement and pretend nothing ever happened. It's not good.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that we're keenly aware of, is that these are emotional sites. We're dealing with emotional topics, and this is an area where we need to like lead by example. Yeah. And that's what I'm really excited to do, is do some really cool projects that are maybe a little splashy and can show people that with the right mindset and tools in our toolbox, which I do believe we have, we can do some really cool stuff and give the community what they need and help the local economy and regional economy and all the way up to the state. So it's
and when you do it in Hartland, man, then you can pretty much do it anywhere.
So whether it's in Hartland, in Waterville, in Augusta, in Bangor, in Bath, or down in York, we've got projects all over the state that we're excited to move forward on, and it's going to be an exciting next few years while we do get our hands in more projects and start executing on our mission.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a firm believer, and it's why I've supported this initiative, because when you see this happen, okay, then there's a success. And then it's like, oh yeah, I was talking with a guy yesterday. His company's 50 years old. This is down in Boston at a trade show for additive manufacturing. Okay. So they make materials to basically like use to 3D print things. And his dad started this company 50 years ago, but it was only 7 years ago that he, as the CEO and president of the company, decided to invest in doing 3D printing themselves, like buying the machines and stuff to do it. And everybody was like, we're a materials company. We make the materials that go into these machines. We're not getting into the printing side. And he's like, well, I'm going to make the investment. So he did. Well, now it's going through the roof. Like they're printing a 40-foot long truss for my company right now. And everyone on his team is like, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. You know what I mean? And he's like, whoa, where were you guys 7 years ago when I said that I wanted to make this investment and you thought it was a bad idea? And I think that this is what's going to happen with the work from Maine Redevelopment, which is you're taking these properties that are stuck. And everyone, including myself, I was self-telling you about Hartland earlier, like, yeah, I don't know. Is this the big one to take a splash on? But I'm confident it will come around. And especially seeing the way the traction and things have been going, you know, once there's a win there, people start to have more hope that it's possible. You know what I mean? And like beyond just that one local community, like the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, one of my personal and professional goals is to do all a handful of different types of projects over the next few years, or more than a handful, hopefully, so that if somebody brings up a certain property type or challenge that's holding it back, I've got a portfolio of successes that we can point to and say, okay, yes, that's a challenge we've heard before. This is how we solved it here. Let's see if it works with you, or find a new way to solve this problem. And I think that constant variety of project types and different challenges that we've got to solve is what gets me and our whole team really excited about doing this work. I haven't said enough, I think, about how awesome our team is.
Yeah. How many people are there?
We've got 4 people.
Wow, it's a lot of work for 4 people.
It is. Yeah, it's a big state. We're a remote first team, mostly because we're always on the road, moving around, going to see projects.
Or being on podcasts.
Yeah. So it's a small team. We're looking to potentially add to the team over the next year or so, just with the sheer number of projects that are on our pipeline. But yeah, it's a really great place to work, and it's a good team to be a part of. Folks,
sounds like it's got a pretty entrepreneurial vibe, and you're able to move quickly and not. I mean, obviously, the bigger teams get, the more things can slow down.
No, it is. We definitely have an entrepreneurial vibe, and that was purposeful by some of our board members and our director in the hiring process of assembling this team. Myself and at my work at Central Maine Growth Council worked with Dirigo Labs, which was the business accelerator arm of that organization. Still is, I should say. Dirigo Labs doing great work. And I got exposed to that kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem in Maine that's really, really robust. And one of our other teammates, she is a former founder, or still a founder, of her own business that built up and scaled and exited. So it's that energy is really prominent in the way we approach projects, which I think some communities and developers have found kind of refreshing. It's a different kind of cadence, and we've got a much higher risk tolerance than the typical public organization would have.
Yeah, because otherwise this would either be it doesn't happen. There's kind of some options. It doesn't happen. Private developer does it maybe if they have strong conviction that there is a play to be. I mean, unless it's a nonprofit private developer, they got to have some kind of return to justify their efforts. Or then it's a municipality, which largely has folks working there that are doing a whole host of other different things, if they even have an economic development department to begin with, which many don't. And they've got other mandates too that they need to deal with, not just only development of properties. Like economic developers in municipalities are not generally real estate developers.
Yeah, no, not. It's not super common, and so we're trying to bridge that gap and make sure that folks can see that these projects are viable and there's value there. Because we believe that there is every stuck site has a next chapter. And we're excited to get there.
Yeah, that's great. And so we've talked a little bit about it too, but this is Housing Matters podcast, so I'd be remiss if I didn't dig a little deeper into the housing aspect of it. Like every project that you look at, is it really truly driven by the community? Meaning, like, if all the community were to come out and say we want the Hartland Tannery to just be a giant roller rink, is that where it would be, or is there some kind of requirement to like have a housing component?
That'd be a large roller rink. I would be excited to see that AI rendering.
That would be fun. We should actually do that just for that.
Yeah, there's your thumbnail. But you know, if there was like insane community consensus for something like that seems infeasible, and maybe, you know, we would, okay, if this is truly what the community wants, is there development appetite for something like this? What's the economic benefit of it? Is it even feasible? And then go from there. I think, you know, with our approach, we are use agnostic on either side of the redevelopment timeline. If it's been developed for anything in the past and it's stuck, we're happy to work on it. And what it becomes in the future, if it's housing, commercial use, mixed use, or industrial or something else, we're good with whatever that is, as long as it makes sense, is feasible, or I should say viable, and aligned with the community interest. So if it's meeting those things, then we're happy. Obviously, we're very well aware that housing is a huge issue in the state right now, and we need more of it. I think inherently, by the types of properties we work on, housing is going to continue to be an element of that reuse, whether they were previously housing developments or not. So we're keenly aware that that's a huge need, and comes up in every conversation in the communities we go to. So, you know, for instance, in Hartland, the two things that come up the most is we need more housing, maybe specifically 55 and older housing. And we need, you know, jobs locally. And so job creators in housing, you know, it's fairly common to hear in communities that want some growth.
But if the 55 plus people aren't working anymore, who's going to work in the jobs? It's like, I don't know. Sometimes this happens, right? Where there is a lot of drive, particularly in Maine with the oldest population in the US, to like, it's okay if it's for our group. But what about like the 25-year-old that needs to come and work here to do physical therapy, you know, to help you as you age, and also like needs to have a place to live? Is it okay that we like make housing for them too, or only if they're like over 55?
Yeah, I think somewhere like Hartland, it's a big enough site that we can have a mix of whatever housing product we need. But
do you guys ever though get into that part of the conversation, like maybe kind of trying to get people to open up their?
I think we share what the objective, like data driven viability projections like show. You know, this is what the state and what the region and your community by the data looks like is needed here. This is what you guys are telling us. If there's, you know, let's find where's the crossover, what's the middle ground. I mean, we're not the ones that are taking the risk of the development investment. Right. That's for the developer. And so, you know,
but there's a good chance once that developer comes after this process, they're not going to be going to the planning board meeting, having a bunch of people with pitchforks around saying we don't want this, because those people were all part of the whole process to begin with.
That's the goal, is to make, by our engagement, our involvement, we're making that process smoother for a developer to come in.
Yeah.
Obviously, there will be outliers, but
sure,
that's one way that we'd like to measure our success is
because we've talked about this way back when in this podcast. It was probably like episode 4 or something with Vanessa Farr. I think she's at Haley Ward, an engineering firm, and she's like talking about community charrettes, you know, like where if you as a developer really should, instead of coming up with your engineer, what is you believe the best thing for that, and then going to planning board, instead you should invite the community in to say what they would like to see there, and then incorporate that into your design process, and then only then go to the planning board. And it seems like this is a little bit more structural approach to doing that, where the onus to pay for that exercise isn't all completely on the developer, because a lot of developers are like, well, that's going to add 3 to 6 months to the timeline, plus another $50,000 to pay for this design charrette. I think I'll just skip that and then pray or hope that like they don't have a problem with what it is that I come up with. And you guys are going further upstream.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to. Yeah, we want to. If that work hasn't been done. We want to find a pathway to getting it done as long as the community has a palate for doing it. And I'm not saying that there isn't going to be a situation where the community is like, no, we don't. Let's just have a developer come in and do what they want to do here. It's they can buy a site. We just want it on the tax rolls. I'm sure that'll occur at some point. And we're in doing this work that you just put very, very, very well of doing that planning exercise ahead of time so the developer can have a smoother path to success and a more expeditious pathway there for their development. We think that that's the right way to do it. We're going to do a handful of them, and then we'll see if that was true.
Yeah.
And then if we need to pivot or adjust or recalibrate how we do this or approach it, then we will. But right now, this seems to be the most the way we can have the most impact immediately on a site.
Are you guys keeping data on, like as an example, the Hartland Tannery site? I don't know if they ever paid their property taxes. It sounded like they went through bankruptcy, but you have sites like that where at one point there was private enterprise that was paying property tax. But for other sites, maybe it's an old church or like a school or some other thing that was not ever on the property tax rolls, that now through this work that you're doing would conceivably, I mean, I guess unless it's turned back into a school or some other kind of not obligated to pay property tax entity, like it's going to get back on the rolls. Right. So then now you're generating revenue in that local community vis-a-vis the property tax that was never there to begin with. Are you guys keeping track of this stuff at all? Or?
Yeah. I mean, so we've, like I said, Heartland's our first one that we banked. So we're not there yet. But the ways that we'll measure our success, what our KPIs are, obviously the general ones, their economic development standards like job creation, the actual investment into the community for each project to the best that we can cite it, and then the taxable value of properties that are going back on the rolls for these communities. But a lot of the ways that we would track those successes are those are kind of lagging indicators. They take a while to show up because of the early phase that we're engaging, and so how do we measure what our success looks like in the near term? And I think that's by the recognition, bringing the community together, just unlocking these properties by getting them into the land bank or getting them into the hands of somebody who's going to do something good with the site or something with the site, and bringing some hope back to these communities for these sites that have been sitting vacant and abandoned for years. And I think there's been 2 or 3 communities that I've been in so far that we've gotten a response after going to the meet with the locals or the interested developer, comments from not just me but our whole team, people engaging of, hey, they came and looked at this site and now we've got hope that something can happen here again. And that's like the biggest compliment I could ever get, is
that's
that
awesome.
We're giving these communities hope that there'll be another phase of life for this property or this site.
Love it. So you're still early, as you just mentioned, but you're taking on these major projects and building the partnerships. As you look ahead, Gabe, what are some of the most things that you're most excited about? Like what you said what success would look like for this organization is giving them hope, but like let's say 10 years from now, what does it look like to you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm looking really forward to is, in the near term, getting the Hartland project, seeing that through to getting developers and investment onto that property after we've cleared it of the current conditions. That's the first one, so that's going to be like, that is top of mind right now until it's done. But just all of the different types of properties and buildings, mixed use buildings in downtown like the one we're in today. Working with community land trusts and conservation organizations to help interconnect their properties with something that is currently an industrial site that has title issues constraining it from getting used actively. Like all of these different really creative solutions that are kind of at arm's reach right now. I'm really excited about us getting the opportunity to engage with them and get really good at doing those kind of complex engagements and unlocking of properties really well. I'm also really excited to grow our team over the next few years. It's a really, we've got a really good culture right now, and it's obviously really small. And bringing in like-minded and engaged and excited people, this really cool work is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. And then we also have a fairly ambitious goal of over the next few years to 10x our revenue. And that is going to be, it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be a lot of different ways. You know, that might be by selling some of the properties that are in our land bank to developers and investors after we've done the work of unlocking it and clearing those barriers. Maybe it looks like we do get, you know, a little more involved in the development process, or something else that's creative that we haven't figured out yet. But
and I
that
think there's
challenge
a unique,
is exciting.
and we've talked about this probably too a little bit, which is there's a change in administration coming in Maine, which whatever way it goes, there's an opportunity to get the next chief executive to put into the budget some resources for something like this. And I think it's important for people listening to know that there's an opportunity in Maine through Maine Redevelopment. If you're not a Maine person listening to this and want to invest in projects, to maybe reach out to Maine Redevelopment and say, what kind of opportunities are on your radar? You know, because we need to also pull in, yes, we need people to move here to take jobs, but we also need to get more developers to come to Maine, you know, to look at opportunities, to say, yeah, I want to put my capital behind that. And wow, that's cool. This organization has de-risked that site and I've got $10 million to deploy. Maybe I should go to Hartland and do that project as an example.
Yeah, especially with things like the next round of opportunity zones rolling out over the next calendar year.
Is that site in an opportunity zone?
Heartland is an opportunity zone right now from the 2018
and probably
list.
likely to stay given what's going on here.
And so we're excited to see what the next round shows of opportunity zones and where we've got properties right now in our pipeline or that can get added in that have that kind of layering.
On that topic,
incentives.
before we're done, could somebody reach out to your organization and say, hey, look, I don't really know much about opportunity zones, but I'm in. If you can help me understand, you know, do you ever, would that be a resource that Maine Redevelopment would help with?
That's part of our technical assistance is we want to make sure that every project that is, you know, needs the help is exposed to or educated on all of the available public finance tools and incentives that we have in Maine to make those projects move forward. And that includes opportunity zones, of course. So if somebody's got questions, either, you know, happy to provide that support. And if they need really, really technical, support, we can probably connect them with somebody who is a little more technically experienced than I am.
Yeah, some of the greenest, most environmentally friendly projects are those of reuse of recycling existing buildings, you know, but they come with a whole host of, you know, challenges because of, you know, functional obsolescence and all these environmental challenges and stuff that you've talked about. And so what you're really doing is making it a lot easier for people to recycle properties. You know what I mean?
That is, recycling properties is, I think, one of the early taglines our director was using to help people like wrap their head around how we operate and what our goal is. So that's cool. Absolutely.
Well, so for those listening that want to learn more about Maine Redevelopment and what you're doing, where can they go?
Our website, maineredevelopment.org, or reach right out to me or any of my colleagues. Our contact info is right there on the website, or I'm sure will be somehow included in this podcast.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes, and we'll make sure to link to all the socials and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
we're pretty active on LinkedIn, I believe. Yeah,
cool.
So,
well, Gabe, thanks for joining us today, and I've learned even more now today about what's going on, and our audience, I think, is really going to be thrilled to hear about this great work that's going on in Maine, and keep leading Dirigo as we go.
Yeah, let me know when we can do a project together.
We will. Cheers.